Yeah, you are paid the bucks to fix things that are broken, and broken things cause frustration. So you need to be up for it. I think one thing for product management roles is it's like learning how to ride a bicycle. Like you have to do it to know it.
A lot of software engineers want to transition to the product management because they don't want to code.
Starting off as a product manager is extremely difficult unless you get into these coveted programs at Google, Yahoo, Facebook, or Meta now.
PM role or a job is going to be obsolete in the future.
As a PM, your job is to figure out the what, when, and the why. And as an engineer, your job is to figure out the how. Instead of spending money, I'll just go get a job at a business-first company, and that will be an MBA for me.
PMs versus engineers who actually run the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Your Buddy Nakul. Today's podcast is for every engineer who has ever wondered that I don't want to code forever. Because today's guest Manan exactly did the same. He did his master's in computer science from USC and then made a bold move of switching from software engineering to product management at Amazon. No MBA, no shortcut, but just strategy and hustle. We'll talk about his rejections, strategy, how to prove that you are a PM material, breaking into PM as an international student, and most importantly, how AI might affect PMs in 2025 and beyond. If you have ever wondered, can I become a PM without a business degree or like without an MBA, and how to transition from a software engineer role to a PM, then there can't be more valuable podcast than this one because we are in conversation with Manan Upadhye. Hi, Manan, and thank you so much for joining today. So, I'm going to start by asking you uh, how did you transition into a PM role? Because, like I said, you completed your master's at USC in computer science. So, before going into how did you made yourself a PM material, I would first like to understand what made you think that you wanted to make a shift to the PM role.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me here. It's great to be here and hope I can impart some knowledge to all of your viewers. Um, that's a great question overall. I think my first introduction to product management happened when I joined USC in the first semester. Uh, I happened upon this website called techcrunch.com, as all of you might be aware. And at that website, I found this very new kind of a new blog post that said a new job role coming up called product management. And I was reading the blog post, and that's where I found out that, oh, there's a job role called product management, and you can be in technology, but you don't have to code for life. And that was my introduction essentially to product management. I dug deeper, figured out what the role was all about, what do you do, what skills you need, and all of that. And by the end of the first semester, I kind of made up my mind through my research, and I spoke to my kind of advisors at the college as well. And through all of these things, made up my mind like this is something I want to pursue long term. And yeah, try to structure my undergrad courses in that way, or sorry, grad school courses in that way.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good. So, what I understand from you right now is you already made your mind while you were doing your master's, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
So, then did you happen to directly join a company as a PM or did you started with a typical software engineer path?
I did not start off as a product manager, and I think this might be a controversial thing, but I don't think people should start off as a product manager. There are certain programs, kind of the associate product manager programs at Google, Yahoo, that give you give you that jumping off board where you can start off as a product manager initially. But those are highly specific, tailored programs that make you learn all of the required skills. But overall, through my research and through a series of rejections, I came to realize that as starting off as a product manager is extremely difficult unless you get into these coveted programs at Google, Yahoo, Facebook, or Meta now, or any of these companies. Otherwise, you need to kind of take a skill building approach to your career and add on those feathers to your cap and then progressively move into product management. So, right out of school, I decided let me focus on one core pillar, which is engineering, which was kind of my degree and which was my undergrad degree as well, and try to focus on that, knowing that I want to go into product management and structuring my coursework according to that. So yeah, that's the approach I took. Skill building approach, tailoring the courses, always knowing where I want to go, but then taking one step at a time towards that path.
You touched a very important point here that which you said to be a controversial thing, um, that right out of the college, you shouldn't be a product manager, right? Why do you think so?
So here's the thing, right? To be a good product manager, and you need one of the core skills, right? So you need one of these four core skills, and you need to be essentially a T-shaped person. So you need one pillar that balances the umbrella, and the pillar can be either one of the four. So it can be engineering, or it can be analytics, it can be UX design, or it can be business and business domain knowledge. For me, or through my career, engineering was very easy to build a pillar upon because it's something that you study. Everything else is learned by experience. And so to get that real world experience, and to ultimately end up building good products, you require that real world experience, and you require that skill essentially to become a good product manager. And right out of the school, I don't, maybe people might agree, maybe people might not agree, but I don't think you've seen enough products, or you have enough experience or exposure to what are the pros and cons of different techniques or various kind of skill or different know-hows that you might have. So I think that's what I feel like product management is best done once you choose a core pillar for yourself, go deep into that pillar, make that kind of as a pillar for yourself, and then branch out into other of the four concepts. As a PM, you need all of the four that I spoke about, but you need to make a pillar in one of those things. And you can't, in my opinion, you can't get that solid pillar unless you kind of work and do that work day in and day out.
Didn't you feel a need of having a MBA or a business degree? So there are two parts to this. Not just to get a job. Of course, to get a job, you could always have it or you won't have it. But then there's another side to it, which is, can you really become a very good PM without having any of these degrees?
To answer your last question first, I know my manager at Amazon or AWS today is a very good PM. I think one of the best PMs I've worked with, and she has a journalism degree. So I think your degrees does not matter. Uh, Overall, as I kind of was alluding to earlier, right? Like you need to have skills in all of the four core areas that I mentioned: business, UX, engineering, and analytics. You can get that through multiple jobs. You can get that through MBA, any of such path. You can choose your own path, but at the end of it, you should have one of it should be a foundation, and the other area should be kind of an umbrella. But you should be conversant in any all of those four core areas to be a good product manager. If you have exposure, or if you have knowledge of all of these four core areas, you are great. You are set up to be a good product manager. And then it's a constant cycle of doing things and just improving and iterating on building products and kind of thinking about how to build better products.
Very useful and informative for all the viewers, because I have myself had so many queries, and I once had this query. I did a lot of Google that, like, to move to the product management, what kind of knowledge, what kind of education you need. And you touched upon a very important point, which is not just true for product management, but for anything, that degree just gives you maybe a title or a formal education thing. But at the same time, there are so many different sources in the world, and the most important source being the practical knowledge, where you just explained about, gave an example about your manager who did a journalism degree, still ended up being a product manager in a great company, right? So that's definitely going to be motivating to a lot of folks who want to transition. So before we move on to the next segment, let's do a quick fun question, where what's that one misconception engineers, or like the software engineers, have about product managers?
Engineers think product managers just write docs or manage Jira tickets or manage tasks. That maybe too sometimes, but that's not all. That's not the full kind of role or the full spectrum of work as product manager. Essentially, I feel like a product manager is just someone who's plugging holes wherever is needed. And people often give this kind of analogy of like you're the CEO of your product. So as a CEO, you can't differentiate. You need to go in where the armies or the divisions that are weaker and help them, support them. So some days it can be writing Jira tickets and managing those tickets. Some days it can be writing documentation. Other days it might be brainstorming with engineers and the cool whiteboarding sessions that you can do. So I think as a product manager, you need to be ready to do all of these things. and overall keep your eye on the price, essentially, to the metric that you're trying to move or the business outcome you're trying to drive, and do anything and everything to make sure that that outcome is achieved, or you keep moving people forward. And that's your core job as a product manager. So yeah, the duties vary over time. Yes, there are some cool things, there are some uncool things, but you are the CEO, so you need to do everything.
Yeah, I think, and that's true for any job, right?
Yeah.
Like, every like the grass is always greener on the other side. So whenever, like, I've seen people always, whenever they switch, a lot of them, when they are unhappy with one company, when they switch, they feel that things are going to be rosy and all good, and they end up in the same place after some time, because it's never going to be like that.
On this point, like, one of my mentors had given me very nice advice, which is like, they pay you all of these big salaries and all of these big dollars because something is broken, and that's why it's going to cause you frustration. So your job is to fix that something that's broken. So it cannot always be working on the latest technologies. Sometimes the fixes are just basic cron job fixes or stuff like that. So yeah, you are paid the bucks to fix things that are broken, and broken things cause frustration, so you need to be up for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that, let's move a little further into a very important section of the podcast, where we'll talk about how to prepare yourself to switch to a PM role. So there are two ways of being a product manager, according to me, right? Like, one is you take the usual path of business, and then you go on to becoming a product manager. But this podcast specifically is for someone who want to transition into that role. So I want to understand from you that how did you change yourself? And I know you spoke about how did you started taking courses from the first semester, but let's say going beyond that, for someone who started as a software engineer and then now wants to make a shift to a PM, how do they need to prepare themselves to even even start applying for the job and getting calls?
It's a catch 22 situation. You won't get a product manager call if you don't have experience, and to get experience you need someone to kind of give you a job, so you're stuck in that loop forever. So here's how kind of I broke that loop over time. So my very first job out of my master's degree was as an engineer. I was lucky to work at a startup. So at the startup, there is a ton of things to do and lesser people. So I just kind of went and volunteered for multiple things. And over time, I started doing core engineering stuff, expanded into full stack engineering, that expanded into project management. And I started kind of helping my team lead on Jira tickets. And that's where I learned actually Jira. And then over time, I started interacting with the sales team, and I started working and going on to sales calls and sales meetings and all of that. So kind of I expanded my role, and keeping in mind the four core areas I want to develop my skills in, right? So by working on engineering, I was strengthening my foundation. By working with the project manager, I was kind of working on the businessy kind of work. Project manager and the sales team, I was working on the business aspect of things. By working as a full stack engineer, I got to learn a bunch of UI UX technologies, and what is a good UI and what is a good UX, and how to do customer research, and how do you decide if a button is yellow or blue. All of those things, kind of learned skills around those things. And yeah, that's how I kind of expanded my scope, volunteered, raised my hand, put in extra hours, and kind of got those skills. After that, over time, I realized, okay, I've had enough of this at my startup. I wanted a formal, as we were talking about the MBA and the need for that. I thought, instead of spending money, I'll just go get a job at a business first company, and that will be an MBA for me. So I applied and went into consulting and did consulting at Deloitte, and that was, I think, MBA on the job essentially for me, where I was working directly in a consulting environment with Fortune 500 clients, trying to consult on technology and working as a PM, but on a project basis. And after that was my actual break into product management, where I showed all of these skills, showed my practical experience in building products or managing products end to end, uh, from conception to development to launch to kind of feedback and the whole loop again, and ended up as a product manager at a company called Criteo. So that's been my journey so far. So you can potentially take this journey, but I want to highlight, like, the skill based approach and trying to focus on one of the four areas and getting skills on that area was the course. So you can take the route that I've taken, you can take some other roundabout route, you can go to an MBA school and then come into a company like Amazon, which kind of hires directly out of MBA schools and allows you to become a product manager, and that can be a potential path.
Of course, you worked extremely hard for it, so I don't want to take away the credit from you, but you also turned out to be lucky in a way. As a startup, I have worked in the startup, and you really could work on multiple technologies, and there's always this freedom of trying out new things. Now, when I work at a bigger companies, I understand that it's not that flexible, right? You are extremely bound to a team, to a technology or a framework you are working on. So let's say if someone, for example, is in such a company, uh, then what's the approach that person should take? Is it that, I mean, just to give out my, thoughts on this, let me know if that might work or not. Can that person start studying side by side, acquiring the knowledge, just doing courses on Coursera or Udemy, and then will that knowledge be enough to be able to apply and crack a PM role?
I think one thing for product management roles is it's like learning how to ride a bicycle. Like you have to do it to know it. You can't read any books and you will get it. No one. And maybe a better analogy is like becoming a carpenter. You can read books to become a carpenter, but are you actually a good carpenter until you make a table? So who would you trust? Like someone who's read books on carpentry or someone who's actually built 500 tables? So that's the thing. So you need to show practical experience in building products. Yes, theory helps, but you need to show practical things. You've launched something, it's out in the world for people to play with. Essentially think of it as building a portfolio, and that's what's needed as a product manager. So in your kind of scenario that we spoke about, right, working at a big company, you can always go up to your product manager, your team's product manager, and just say, and product managers will love this because they're always swamped with 50 tasks that they don't have time to do. So you can just say like, hey, can I help you with something, and volunteer and take on extra work. This you do in addition to the courses that you mentioned. There are certain books that you can read. You do this, all of these things in parallel, and you get a taste for what product management is, and then you go and apply.
Fantastic. And I 100% agree with this. Like, practical knowledge is the most important thing. And most of the people get stuck into that loop of doing multiple certification courses because I think that's much easier than going out in the world and getting some practical knowledge. So, one thing what I feel you could do is, worst case, if you just can't do any other work in uh, the existing company, maybe you could do your own projects,
Yes.
something on the side, something parallel, try to get more eyeballs on it, put it out in the world and test it out, and then you can just put that on the resume, right?
Exactly.
uh, while you were giving the answer, I heard the word code, right? And that's an important word because that's one of the biggest reason of software engineers wanting to transition to product management. uh, so there are two questions that comes into my mind. One is, as a product manager, do you code as you used to code as a software engineer? And the second question is, a lot of software engineers want to transition to the product management because they don't want to code. How is that the correct approach?
That's a very good question. I think as a product manager, if you are a if you're coming from a technical background, there may be times where you might just say, instead of relying on someone else, let me just code it up and get it done with. And this you will do a lot, and this will be a lot for writing SQL queries essentially, and kind of getting data if you're to determine if a product is working or not working, or kind of getting any business metric data. And that's a valuable skill to have. But I as a product manager, you don't need to know how to code, but it's a good added advantage if you can code. So that's the first, trying to answer the first part of a question. The second part of a question is, I think it's more, I would say more philosophical, but there are some people in my team who love coding day and night, and that's all they want to do, and that's what they enjoy. When I started coding full time, I quickly realized this is not something I want to do. Even though I enjoy coding, I enjoyed the whole process of why is someone asking me to code this, or what prompted this feature, or why are they asking me to build this. And as I dug deeper, I got more and more interested into those aspects of things. What happens if after I've launched a feature, or after I've launched my code, where is it going? How is it working in the marketplace or in kind of the wild, as you said? And all of these aspects started interesting me more than the actual coding part of it. And that's when I realized, like, okay, maybe this is not something for me. I'm more interested in the end to end stuff of thing. Yes, I want to be in technology, but coding may not be the right thing for me, because yeah, I'm looking at it at this point in time after 2.5 3 years of coding was as a chore rather than something I enjoy. So I think that's where I kind of quickly realized, or over time realized, yeah, coding is not for me.
So let's say a coder just doing a PM won't be a good PM. And I think that's one of the problems I'm reading a lot online, that PMs are being bashed because a lot of them are not great PMs, because a lot of them just happen to switch to PMs. And so it's extremely important to not just do your usual tasks as a PM, but to change your mindset of how a product is created, how it is developed, and how it is eventually shipped.
Yeah, I fully agree to that. Like, as a PM, your job is to figure out the what, when, and the why. And as an engineer, your job is to figure out the how. Now, different people find different questions interesting, but I found the what, when, and why to be more interesting than the how. And that's why I chose to be a PM. And you brought up a really good point of, like, not just doing the functions, but as a PM, you need to bring in something called your perspective on how things should look like, or how a future state should look like, and some creativity or some imagination on how things will look like. Because as a PM, 50% of your job is convincing others to use your product. And that you can do only if you're creative or imaginative and bringing them on board. And that's something, I guess, if you're an engineer, you've not done before. Is it involves a lot of talking, it involves a lot of convincing people. Code is black and white, it's straightforward. It works, it doesn't work. People are complex, convincing people is gray, and you need to be comfortable with that. So I think that's one thing you'll find something very different about becoming a PM, which you may or may not like.
So, because we are talking about transitioning from a tech background, especially to a PM, did your tech background help you as a PM, especially in the interviews and while you're working, or it just went against you? So, to give you more context, if you relatively compare this with someone from a business degree, how would you put this?
Sometimes tech background, and in my case as well, it has worked against me in interviews initially, until I realized what mistake I was making in the interviews. And that was the reason of my initial rejections that I've faced. And as an engineer, whenever you see a problem, your first instinct is to think about solutions. And that's the mistake that I think, as an engineering person, you're so solution oriented that you even forget that, is this problem worth solving, or who am I solving this problem for? And that is the mistake I was initially making in my interviews, was I was straight away jumping to the solution and not thinking about if I should even solve this problem, or who's the who's the user for this problem. And I guess, yeah, that's one of the pitfalls you might face as a technical person during interview process. So you need to try very hard to curb that instinct. And I've learned over time, sometimes I still let loose and that comes out, but you need to try very hard to control your instinct about jumping straight to the solution, because that may not be the right answer. You might decide after an analysis that I don't want to solve this problem because the money, it's not a feasible business investment. I'm going to spend more money than I'm going to make, so why solve this problem? That's a valid that happens, that very often in day to day life. um, but the technical background will also work for you when you are in a company and working with engineers, because you can talk to engineers in their own language and you can make them understand your vision better. Uh, I think in big companies, or in any company, as a PM, your job is to speak for the person who's not in the meeting, at especially at big companies. So with your engineers, you're speaking for the customers. When you're talking to your business stakeholders, you're speaking for your engineers, because your business stakeholders might demand unrealistic timelines. And you know, as a technical person, it's not feasible. It's a stupid feature request. So you push back on that. So you kind of advocate for the person who's not in the meeting room. And that's your job as a PM. And that's where a technical background helps a lot, because you don't need to constantly go to your engineer and ask, hey, is this feasible? Can we do this? You can kind of have a basic judgment of how things are working and suggest some improvements, and then take it reduces the cycle time of release product releases. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You need to be careful with the technical background.
Yeah, and I'll just give you my opinion on this because I have once thought about this one that it's really great if you have the engineering background once you have enough PM experience. So, for example, let's say you have engineering background, you start as a PM. First 2 to 3 years is going to be hard, exactly because of the reason you mentioned. Because every time you get a problem, the first hat you're going to wear is not the PM but the engineering hat. The more experience you start having of PM, naturally you will start wearing the PM hat, but you will never lose the engineering mindset you had. So it just gets easier to talk with the stakeholders because not many people, I mean, the business people, right? They don't have this engineering language that we say. And it really gets hard to talk with multiple stakeholders if you can't speak that language. So I think definitely engineers have an edge, but initially it's going to be tough because of the exact point you mentioned. So people often compare, or I can even say that people don't understand the two roles, which is program manager and product manager. They use these two terms interchangeably. And I wanted to understand from you, what is the similarity, or they are completely different, or are they same? Because I have seen a lot of people when read PM, they just confuse program managers with product managers. Like, so both the same or they are different?
During the product building process, that you need to answer four basic questions: the why, the what, the when, and the how. Usually at startups, the why, what, and when is done by a product manager. But at big companies, because they have so many resources, product manager has some extra help, where the when is essentially figured out by program managers. So the program manager's core responsibility is to work on timelines, make sure the timelines don't slip, work with parallel teams or sister teams to figure out dependencies and push them so that you don't miss your own timeline. And the product manager focuses on the what and the why more in big companies. But at startups, you need to do all of these things. The how is squarely engineering, so we can ignore that. But I think that's the core difference between program managers and product managers.
Yeah, that's beautifully explained. Let's jump to the most important segment, which is the AI, because everywhere we go, we are just hearing that one word, which is AI, and we can see the impacts of that. A lot of companies stopped hiring, jobs are being cut, like the positions are being cut. Uh, I also read that PM role or a job is going to be obsolete in the future because of AI. What's your take on it?
I think PM role as it is today might be obsolete, or some aspects of that role might be obsolete. Stuff like writing business requirements documents or product requirements documents. Usually, when you start off your career, your managers or your higher ups will give you, hey, write a product requirements document for this. That might become obsolete, but then it opens up another can of worms, which is how do you decide what to build? Because building now becomes, with AI, building stuff becomes so easy. You can potentially build 50 different things. How do you prioritize between these 50 things? What to build now? I think that's going to be more important. And so, yeah, the job is not going to be obsolete. I think the job is going to morph into something different.
If I understand that correctly, what you're trying to say is even after, let's say, 10 years, uh, the PM role will still be relevant, but the way, or like the job responsibilities might change a bit, or let's say the definition of a PM role will change a little bit. So
Yes.
it will evolve with AI.
Yes. So, in my opinion, like AI cannot bring in high judgment or something we call taste, right? When I talk about a mobile phone, what's the best mobile phone that will pop up in your mind when I talk about mobile phones? It's going to be the iPhone. Why do you like the iPhone compared to some other company's phone? What's different about the iPhone than these other phones? So that's what we call taste in product management, which is how the iPhone is designed, how the colors are, the attention to detail, how the OS is, and that's what makes an iPhone an iPhone. There are 50,000 phones in the market. Why do you pay $1,500 to buy an iPhone versus you can get a phone for $100? Why does everyone want an iPhone? That's your job as a product manager to figure out what makes an iPhone and then work on that. That can never be replaced by AI, I think. So I think that's how the job is going to change because building is going to be so easy. The stress is going to come on who can think about the next iPhone, and that's going to matter now.
And so, with this, we are to our last segment, which is the rapid fire. So, the first question is very much what you exactly did. If someone is doing their master's in CS and if they aspire to be a PM, what are those three things that they should start today?
Start going to hackathons. Your schools will have a ton of hackathons. Start going there and start building stuff. The second thing is learn about user experience, user interface. If you are in a computer science degree, that may or may not be a part of your coursework. So make sure you are learning about that. The third thing would be stick to stick to coding.
What's the most annoying thing engineers say or think about a PM?
Can you write me a Jira ticket?
What's that one thing that you absolutely hate about the PM life?
You need to learn with delayed gratification. Whatever you do today, you might get a result after 2 months, and you need to be okay with that. Otherwise, you might end up with an identity crisis.
And in the today's world of social media, uh, where everyone is used to instant gratification, it's hard. I agree with that. What's that one line that always impresses in a PM interview?
Let me use a framework to answer your question.
Oh, that's a very good point. Who's the hardest stakeholder to manage? Is it engineer, designer, or leadership?
Engineers.
Okay, I thought it would be leadership.
So engineers are very particular about how they want to implement a system or a solution or a feature. Engineers try to optimize it from the get-go. Sometimes you don't need full optimizations from the start. It can be a hacky system. It needs to produce business value, and then you can invest time and resources to making it perfect. Engineers, I've seen in my experience, get stuck in building a perfect system first and then launching it. You need to reverse the order.
Was that one thing that you wish you knew before making a switch from software engineering to the PM?
The amount of emails you'll be writing.
Is it that high of a number?
Yes, your basic job as a PM is to connect the dots between multiple people, and you do that over email. So you'll spend most of your time in email.
And to the last question, a very controversial one. PMs versus engineers. Who actually run the show?
I'm going to take the diplomatic way out here, and I'm going to say it's a single team that needs everyone. So take a cricket analogy. You need a Dhoni, you need a Rohit Sharma, and a Virat Kohli to win the World Cup. So
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm sure that this was one of the most valuable podcasts because a lot of students I know, a lot of working professionals I know, constantly want to make a switch from engineering to PM. And to understand this from someone who has done it himself, I don't think there can be a better person than explaining this. So, thank you so much for joining on today's podcast. I'll be back with someone new in another podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next podcast. Thank you.